Danny Cole had been on Horizon 7 for 3 months now. The Deep Space Medical Station floated in orbit around a neutral planet, far from Earth and far from anything he had ever known. He was the first human medic assigned to work here. The station was a joint facility where humans and aliens worked together to help sick and injured travelers from across the galaxy. Danny had trained for years to get this position. He wanted to prove that humans could work alongside any species in the universe. The station was large and clean with white walls and soft blue lights that never turned off completely. Hundreds of staff members lived and worked here. Most of them were aliens from different worlds. Danny had learned to recognize many species during his time on the station. There were the tall and thin with their 4 arms. There were the short and furry who spoke in high-pitched voices. And then there were the were different from the others. They stood taller than humans with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in certain lights. Their eyes were large and expressive, colored in shades of silver and violet. They moved with grace and spoke in melodic voices that sounded like music. But the most unusual thing about was their ability to sense emotions. They were not fully telepathic, but they could feel strong feelings from those around them. 3 sisters worked as nurses on the station. Their names were, and Myra was the eldest with silver eyes and a calm presence that commanded respect, was the middle sister with violet eyes and a curious nature that led her to ask many questions. Myra was the youngest with eyes that shifted between silver and violet depending on her mood. She was quieter than her sisters but watched everything with intense attention. Danny had noticed something strange about the 3 sisters from his first week on the station. They treated him differently than they treated everyone else. When he walked past them in the corridors, they would stop talking and whisper to each other in their own language. When he entered a room, they would find reasons to leave. Yet somehow they always seemed to be nearby. He would turn a corner and find one of them standing there. He would look up from his work and catch one of them watching him before quickly looking away. Other human crew members had warned Danny about before he arrived. They said that considered humans to be primitive creatures. They said that thought humans were too emotional and too messy and too loud. They said that would never accept a human as an equal. Danny had tried not to let these warnings affect him. He smiled at the sisters when he saw them. He greeted them politely. He offered to help them when they carried heavy equipment. But they always responded with short answers and distant looks. It confused Danny more than it hurt him. He could not understand why they avoided conversation with him but always stayed close. He could not understand why they whispered about him but never spoke to him directly. He wanted to know the truth. Were they mocking him behind his back? Did they think he was not good enough to work on the station? Or was something else happening that he did not understand? The answer came to him during a particularly long shift. A transport ship had crashed near the station, and dozens of injured passengers needed care. Danny worked for 16 hours without rest. He bandaged wounds and administered medicine and comforted frightened patients who had never seen a human before. By the time the emergency ended, his body ached and his eyes burned from exhaustion. He walked to the common rest area on the medical floor. It was a quiet room with soft chairs and dim lighting where staff could take breaks between shifts. The room was empty when Danny entered. He collapsed onto one of the long couches and let out a tired sigh. He should go back to his quarters and sleep properly, but he was too tired to walk that far. He decided to rest for just a few minutes. As he lay there with his eyes closed, an idea formed in his tired mind. What if he pretended to fall asleep? What if he stayed perfectly still and let the sisters think he could not hear them? Maybe then they would speak freely. Maybe then he would finally understand why they acted so strangely around him. Danny adjusted his position so his back faced the room. He pulled a thin blanket over himself and steadied his breathing. He made himself look like a man in deep sleep. Then he activated a special feature on his neural interface. The universal translator implanted behind his ear could display text on the inside of his eyelids. He would be able to read any translated speech without opening his eyes. He waited. Minutes passed slowly. Danny focused on keeping his breathing deep and even. He relaxed his muscles and let his body sink into the couch. The room remained quiet except for the soft hum of the station's systems. Then he heard the door slide open. Footsteps entered the room, light footsteps that barely made sound. Danny recognized the graceful movement of immediately. He heard whispered words in a language that sounded like flowing water and ringing bells. His translator began converting the sounds into text that scrolled across his closed eyelids. "He is here," one voice said. Danny recognized it as the middle sister. "Is he sleeping?" another voice asked. This was Myra, the youngest. "His breathing is slow and steady," the third voice answered, the eldest. "His emotional presence is dim. He appears to be in deep sleep." Danny forced himself to remain still. His heart wanted to beat faster, but he controlled it through the breathing techniques he had learned in medic training. This was it. This was his chance to learn the truth about what the sisters really thought of him. He heard them settle into chairs nearby. They spoke quietly to each other, assuming the human on the couch could not understand their language even if he were awake. They did not know about his translator. They did not know he could read every word they said. Danny kept his eyes closed and waited for their secrets to unfold. Danny remained perfectly still on the couch. His back faced the three sisters, and his breathing stayed slow and deep. The translated text continued to scroll across the inside of his closed eyelids as the sisters spoke in their melodic language. "I cannot stop thinking about what happened during the emergency," said. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of genuine emotion. "Did you see how long he worked without stopping?" 16 hours, replied. "I counted. 16 hours without food or rest. He helped 47 patients before he finally stopped." "Most species would have collapsed after 8 hours of such work," continued. "I have worked on this station for 6 years. I have never seen anyone push themselves so hard. Not even only him." Danny felt surprise wash through him. He had expected criticism or mockery. Instead, sounded impressed. More than impressed, she sounded amazed. "Human biology is fascinating," said. Danny heard the sound of her settling deeper into her chair. "I have been studying it in my spare time. Did you know that humans can survive injuries that would kill most galactic species? Their bodies can heal from damage that would be permanent for us. They can lose blood and recover. They can break bones and mend. They are built for survival in ways we never understood." "The scars," Myra said quietly. It was the first time the youngest sister had spoken more than a few words. "Have you seen the scars on his arms?" "From the shuttle accident 3 years ago," answered. "I read his medical file. He was the only survivor. He pulled himself from burning wreckage with 2 broken ribs and a fractured leg. He walked 4 kilometers to reach a communication beacon. Any other species would have died waiting for rescue." Danny remembered that accident. He remembered the pain and the fear and the long walk through an empty wasteland. He had never thought of it as impressive. He had simply done what he needed to do to survive. But hearing the sisters discuss it with such admiration made him see it differently. "I find his scars admirable," Myra said softly. "Other species try to hide their damage. They remove marks of injury and pretend they were never hurt. But he carries his scars openly. They tell the story of what he survived." "Humans are strange that way," agreed. "They do not hide from their past. They carry it with them and let it make them stronger." The conversation paused for a moment. Danny could hear the soft sound of the sisters breathing. Then Myra spoke again, and her words made Danny's heart skip. "I think human emotions are beautiful." Neither of her sisters responded immediately. Myra continued, her voice gaining strength as she shared thoughts she had clearly held inside for a long time. "We are taught to suppress our feelings. We learn from childhood to keep our emotions hidden and controlled. We sense what others feel, but we rarely let ourselves feel openly. But humans are different. They express joy and sadness and anger and love without shame. They laugh loudly and cry freely and show affection to those they care about. It is considered primitive by our elders, said, but her tone suggested she did not agree with that view. Perhaps our elders are wrong, Myra replied. I watch him laugh with patience. I watch him comfort those who are afraid. I watch him celebrate small victories and mourn small losses, and I find myself wishing I understood what that feels like. I wish I could laugh the way he laughs. It looks like freedom. Danny felt heat rising to his face. He was grateful his back faced the sisters so they could not see his reaction. He had never imagined that anyone would look at his emotional nature as something to admire. He had always been told that humans were too emotional, too open, too vulnerable. But Myra spoke of these things like they were gifts. We should be careful, said. Speaking of him this way could lead to complications. You speak of him too, sister, teased gently. Do not pretend you have not noticed his kindness. Do not pretend you have not watched him the way we have. Was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter than before. He remembers things, she said. Small things. He remembers that physician prefers his medication in liquid form. He remembers that nurse is afraid of loud noises. He remembers that I once mentioned missing the flowers of our, and the next week he found a way to display images of gardens on the screens in my work area. Danny remembered doing that. He had overheard mention the gardens during a conversation with her sisters. He had searched the station's database for images of plant life and programmed them to rotate on the screens near her station. He had not told anyone. He had not expected thanks. He had simply wanted to do something kind. And what he did for, Myra added. When that injured worker needed to reach medical and the hover stretcher was broken. He carried her, said. She weighed almost as much as him, and he carried her the entire way. Regulations said he should have waited for equipment. He ignored regulations because she was in pain and afraid. He could have been disciplined for that, said. He did not care, replied. He only cared about helping her. The room fell quiet again. Danny's heart was beating faster now despite his efforts to control it. He focused on his breathing and tried to calm himself. He could not let them sense his emotions and realize he was awake. But suddenly stopped speaking. Danny heard her shift in her chair. Something is wrong, she said slowly. I sense an elevated heart rate nearby. Danny's blood ran cold. He forced himself to breathe even more slowly. He relaxed every muscle in his body. He thought of calm things, still water, empty space, quiet rooms. Are you certain? Asked. I thought I sensed something, said. But perhaps it was a passing vibration from a ship. The station systems can sometimes create false readings. He appears deeply asleep, Myra said. His body has not moved. You are right, agreed after a pause. I must have been mistaken. Danny allowed himself a small moment of relief. He had come close to being discovered, but the sisters had dismissed their concerns, and the conversation would continue. He kept his eyes closed and waited to hear what else they would reveal. Danny continued to lie still on the couch. His heart rate had returned to normal after his brief suspicion. He focused on maintaining the appearance of deep sleep, while the translated text kept scrolling across his closed eyelids. The sisters seemed convinced he could not hear them, and their conversation grew more personal with each passing minute. He looks uncomfortable, Myra said suddenly. The blanket has slipped from his shoulder. Leave him be, advised. We should not disturb him. But he worked so hard today, Myra replied. He deserves proper rest. Danny heard the soft sound of movement. Light footsteps approached the couch where he lay. He kept his breathing steady and his body relaxed. Then he felt something he did not expect. Gentle hands adjusted the thin blanket over his shoulder, pulling it higher to cover him properly. The touch was careful and tender, like someone handling something precious. He heard sharp intakes of breath from across the room, and had clearly seen what Myra had done. Myra whispered, "What are you doing?" "He was cold," Myra replied simply. She had not moved away from the couch. Danny could sense her presence close beside him. "We do not do that," said. Her voice was tight with surprise. "We do not touch other species so casually. We do not show such care to those outside our family." "Perhaps that is a rule worth breaking," Myra said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Perhaps we have been wrong to keep such distance from others." Danny's face felt warm. He was blushing, and he could do nothing to stop it. Fortunately, his face was turned away from the sisters and hidden by the blanket. He could only hope that Myra had already stepped back and could not see the red color spreading across his cheeks. "Sister," said slowly, "are you developing what humans call a crush?" The question hung in the air. Danny waited for Myra to deny it, to laugh it off, to claim she was only being practical. But the denial never came. "I do not know what I feel," Myra admitted. "I only know that when I see him, I want to understand him better, not as a subject of study, not as a curiosity to examine. I want to know him as a person. I want to learn what makes him laugh and what makes him sad. I want to understand why he gives so much of himself to others." "This is dangerous territory," warned. "Forming attachments with humans is complicated. They live shorter lives than we do. They feel everything with such intensity. They form bonds that we might not be able to return properly." "Yet you speak of him with longing in your voice," observed. "You warn us against attachment while your own emotions betray you." Did not respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its authoritative edge. She sounded uncertain, almost vulnerable. "I have tried to maintain professional distance," said. "I have tried to remember our training and our cultural expectations, but he makes it difficult. Every day he does something that surprises me. Every day he shows kindness that I did not expect. He treats everyone with respect regardless of their species. He never acts superior or inferior. He simply treats everyone as equals worthy of care." "That is rare," agreed. "Most species have hierarchies. Most species judge others based on origin or ability or appearance, but he sees only people in need of help." "I have watched him comfort a dying patient," Myra said softly, "an elder with no family left. Danny sat with him for 3 hours during his final night. He held his hand and told him stories about Earth. He made the elder laugh in his last moments. No one asked him to do that. No one would have blamed him for leaving, but he stayed because he cared." Danny remembered that night. He remembered the old named who had traveled alone for 50 years. He remembered the stories he had told about fishing with his father and swimming in the ocean and watching sunsets from mountain peaks. He had wanted to know that someone cared about him at the end. He had not done it for recognition or praise. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. "We were taught that humans are primitive," said. "We were told they are loud and messy and ruled by emotions they cannot control. We were told they are beneath our notice." "We were taught lies," Myra replied firmly. "Or perhaps we were taught incomplete truths," offered. "Humans are loud and messy and emotional, but those traits do not make them lesser. Those traits make them more alive than we have ever allowed ourselves to be." The room fell quiet for a long moment. Danny could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He could feel the warmth of the blanket Myra had adjusted for him. He could sense the weight of the conversation happening around him. "I think we have all grown fond of him," said finally. "Not just as a colleague, not just as someone we work beside. We have grown fond of him as a person. He has changed how we see humans. He has changed how we see ourselves," added quietly. "Then perhaps we should stop hiding," Myra suggested. "Perhaps we should stop whispering about him and avoiding conversations with him. Perhaps we should let him know that we do not look down on humans the way he might believe." "He might not welcome such attention," cautioned. "He might find it strange or uncomfortable. We have not been kind to him with our distance. He might not trust our intentions." "He is human," said. "Humans value honesty and connection. If we approach him with sincerity, I believe he will respond with openness." Danny felt his face grow even warmer. He had expected to discover that the sisters thought poorly of him. Instead, he had learned that they admired him. They had watched him and studied him and found things to respect. More than that, they had grown to care about him in ways he had never imagined. He lay there on the couch, pretending to sleep, knowing that everything had changed. He could not pretend he had not heard their words. He could not ignore what they had revealed. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. Danny knew he could not fake sleep forever. His body was growing stiff from lying in the same position. His mind was racing with everything he had heard. He thought about simply waiting for the sisters to leave and then pretending none of this had happened. But that felt wrong. It felt dishonest in a way that went against everything he believed. The sisters had been honest in their conversation. They had shared their true feelings while believing no one could hear. They had opened themselves up in ways that clearly went against their cultural training. Danny felt that he owed them honesty in return. He could not let them continue thinking he was ignorant of their words. He could not build any kind of relationship on a foundation of deception. He made his decision. He would reveal himself. He would face whatever consequences came from his choice to listen. Danny began to stir slowly. He shifted his weight on the couch and let out a soft groan like someone emerging from deep sleep. He stretched his arms above his head and rolled onto his back. Then he opened his eyes. The three sisters sat frozen in their chairs. Their large eyes were wide with surprise, and their pale blue skin was flushing to a deeper shade of indigo. Danny recognized this color change from his studies of biology. It was the equivalent of a human blush. The sisters were embarrassed. Myra was the first to move. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her eyes darted toward the door as if calculating the fastest escape route. Her sisters remained seated but looked equally ready to flee. "Please wait," Danny said gently. His voice was rough from disuse but carried warmth. "Please do not leave." The sisters exchanged uncertain glances. Myra stopped her movement toward the door but did not sit back down, straightened in her chair and attempted to compose her features into their usual calm expression. Looked at Danny with curiosity mixed with apprehension. "How long have you been awake?" asked. Her voice was controlled, but Danny could hear the tension beneath it. Danny sat up slowly and faced the three sisters. He owed them the truth even if it made things uncomfortable. "I was never fully asleep," he admitted. "I apologize for the deception. My translator was converting your words the entire time. I heard everything you said." The color in the sisters' skin deepened further. Myra looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole, covered her face with her hands. Even the composed eldest seemed momentarily lost for words. "I understand if you are angry," Danny continued. "What I did was not fair. I should have announced my presence when you entered the room. I should have given you the choice of whether to speak freely around me. Instead, I listened without your permission, and I am sorry for that." "Why?" asked after a long pause. "Why did you pretend to sleep?" Danny ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Because I could not understand your behavior toward me. You avoided talking to me directly. You whispered when I passed by. You always seemed nearby yet never engaged with me. Other humans warned me that think we are primitive and unworthy. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know what you really thought of me." "And now you know," said quietly through her hands. "Yes," Danny replied. "Now I know, and I want you to understand something. I am not upset by what I heard. I am not uncomfortable or offended. If anything, I am grateful." Myra finally looked at him directly. Her silver-violet eyes were uncertain. "Grateful." Danny nodded. "Where I come from, being told that 3 incredible people admire you would make anyone's day. I spent 3 months believing you thought poorly of me. I spent 3 months wondering what I had done wrong. And now I learned that you were watching me because you found things to respect. You studied me because you were curious about humans. You kept your distance not because you disliked me, but because you did not know how to approach me. We were taught to maintain distance from humans, explained. Her composure was slowly returning. Our culture emphasizes emotional restraint and careful boundaries with other species. We were not prepared for someone like you. Someone like me? Danny asked. Someone kind, said, finally lowering her hands from her face. Someone who remembers small details and goes out of his way to help others. Someone who carries injured workers and sits with dying patients and works 16-hour shifts without complaint. We expected a primitive human. We found someone who challenged everything we believed. Danny smiled. It was a warm smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. I spent 3 months assuming you looked down on me. You spent 3 months wanting to know me but being afraid to approach. We wasted so much time on misunderstandings. What do we do now? Myra asked softly. Danny considered the question. He thought about the cultural barriers between them. He thought about the differences in their species and ways of experiencing the world. He thought about all the reasons this situation could be complicated and difficult. Then he laughed. The sound surprised the sisters. They looked at him with confusion as he chuckled and shook his head. Danny saw their bewilderment and tried to explain. I am sorry, he said. I am not laughing at you. I am laughing at the situation. 3 months of awkwardness and whispering and avoiding each other. 3 months of wondering and worrying. And it turns out we all wanted the same thing. We all wanted to understand each other better. A small smile appeared on his face. She understood. It is rather absurd when you put it that way. Very absurd, Danny agreed. So here is my suggestion. We start over. No more pretending. No more distance. If you are curious about humans, I'm happy to answer any question you have. And if you will let me, I would like to learn about too. Real learning, not just reading files. I want to know about your culture and your history and what matters to you. The three sisters looked at each other. A silent communication passed between them, the kind of understanding that only existed between family members who had known each other their entire lives. Then nodded slowly. We would like that, she said. We would like that very much. Danny's smile grew wider. He felt warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with hope. This was not how he had expected this day to end, but he was glad for the unexpected path it had taken. Then let us begin again, Danny said. He extended his hand toward in the human greeting gesture. My name is Danny Cole. It is nice to meet you properly. Looked at his hand for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. Her grip was gentle, her blue skin cool against his warm palm. I am, she said. These are my sisters and Myra. We are pleased to know you, Danny Cole. 1 month had passed since that night in the common rest area. The change on Horizon 7 was noticeable to everyone who worked there. Danny Cole and the three sisters had become inseparable during their off-duty hours. Other staff members watched them with curiosity but said nothing. Some smiled knowingly when they saw the four walking together through the corridors. Others whispered about the unusual friendship that had formed between a human and 3 aliens who had once seemed so distant. Danny spent his free time teaching the sisters about human customs. They sat together in the common area while he explained the importance of sharing meals as a social activity. He described how humans gathered around tables to eat and talk and strengthen their bonds. The sisters found this fascinating because typically ate alone in silence. Food was sustenance, not connection. But Danny convinced them to try eating together, and soon they had established a routine of gathering for dinner each evening. He taught them about human humor. This proved more challenging because culture did not include jokes or wordplay. Danny started with simple observations and absurd comparisons. At first the sisters stared at him blankly when he made jokes, but Myra was the first to understand the structure of humor, and one evening she laughed at something Danny said. The sound was light and musical, different from a human laugh but equally joyful. Her sisters looked at her with amazement. Myra covered her mouth in surprise at her own reaction, then started laughing too, and soon joined them. Danny explained the concept of hugs. Physical comfort through embrace was common among humans but foreign to. The sisters listened with interest as he described how a hug could communicate support and care without words. Volunteered to try receiving a hug first. Danny approached her carefully and wrapped his arms around her in a gentle embrace. She stood stiff at first, unsure how to respond. But then she relaxed and tentatively returned the gesture. When they separated, her eyes were wide with wonder. "That was warm," she said simply. "Not just in temperature, it felt warm inside." The sisters began teaching Danny about their culture in return. They showed him meditation techniques that focused on emotional balance and inner peace. Danny struggled at first because his mind was too active to achieve stillness, but with patient guidance he learned to quiet his thoughts and find moments of calm. The meditation helped him manage stress during difficult shifts, and he was grateful for the skill. Taught him about the art of emotional sensing. She explained how her people could perceive strong feelings from others as colors and textures. Joy appeared as golden light. Sadness felt like cool blue water. Anger burned red and sharp. She helped Danny understand his own emotional patterns and how they appeared to those with sensing abilities. He learned that his emotions were unusually bright compared to other species, which explained why the sisters had always been so aware of his presence. Myra shared the complex social structures of society. She described the importance of family units and how sisters often worked and lived together their entire lives. She explained the hierarchy of there and the expectations placed on young. Danny listened carefully and asked questions that showed genuine interest. Myra appreciated his attention to details that others might have found boring. News arrived that the station would have a rest period during the next cycle. Staff members would have 5 days to visit there or take personal leave. Danny had planned to stay on the station and catch up on work. He had no family waiting for him on Earth and no particular desire to make the long journey, but approached him with an unexpected invitation. She spoke formally, as if presenting an official request. "The 3 of us will be returning to our during the rest period," she said. "We would like to invite you to accompany us. It is rare for none to visit our planet, but we have discussed it among ourselves, and we would be honored to show you where we grew up." Danny was surprised by the offer. He knew that we're protective of there and rarely allowed outsiders to visit. The invitation represented a significant gesture of trust. "I would be honored to accept," he replied. Myra smiled at his answer. Then she reached into a small pouch she carried and something that glittered in the station lights. It was a crystal, clear as water with soft blue light glowing at its center. She held it out to Danny with both hands in a gesture that seemed ceremonial. "This is a family stone," Myra explained. Her voice was soft but steady. "We give them to those we consider family by choice rather than blood. It means you are part of our circle. You are welcome in our home. You belong with us." Danny took the crystal carefully. It felt warm in his palm despite its appearance of ice. He looked at the small, glowing object, then at the 3 sisters watching him with hopeful expressions. His eyes began to water. He did not try to hide the tears that formed. "Thank you," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "This means more than I can say." The sisters watched him cry with fascination rather than discomfort. They were still learning to understand human emotional displays, but they recognized the tears as an expression of happiness rather than sadness. Reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, moved to stand beside him. Myra simply smiled with warmth that needed no translation. Later that evening, Danny sat in the common rest area. He was not pretending to sleep this time. Myra sat beside him on the couch, reading from that displayed human poetry she was studying. Sat across from them, working through a collection of human literature that Danny had recommended. Was nearby, reviewing medical files, but she glanced up frequently with soft eyes that betrayed her attention to the group rather than her work. Danny thought about how he had arrived at this station expecting to be an outsider. He had prepared himself for loneliness and professional respect at best. He had expected cultural barriers and cold politeness. He had believed the warnings about and their disdain for humans. Instead, he had found something unexpected. He had found three beings who challenged their own cultural training to reach out to him. He had found curiosity that became caring and distance that became closeness. He had found proof that connection could transcend species boundaries. He had found family in the most unlikely place. He caught Myra looking at him. Her silver-violet eyes held warmth and something deeper that he was only beginning to understand. Danny felt heat rise to his face once again. Some things, he realized, never stopped making you blush. But he did not mind. He did not mind at all.